Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
The case study is to do with a smart device for bedrooms. Let's have a look at the content of the case study. It follows all the phases of the case study, starting from research to implementation. Let's have a look at the tools. It uses brainstorming, mind mapping, contextual inquiry, interviews, talking to experts, affinities, and spatial mappings. And these have been used as part of the project. So the secondary research has been used, primary research has been used, use of these tools, also prototyping techniques, and then validation through feedback. Okay, so we'll have a look at this project. It's a smart device for the bedroom called Denzi. So the mentor for this project is Professor Anirudh Joshi from IDC School of Design at IIT Bombay. 4 students, Anuj, Laksh, Manu and Samarth. So what is Denzi? It's a system that includes a wall-mounted, screen-based switchboard that can control lights, fan, air conditioner, windows, curtains, and any other device, appliances inside the bedroom. It could be your speakers, your television, and other devices. Okay, and the system is integrated with a mobile phone application. That means it will allow you to track its usage, and you can control the system through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It also would allow the users to personalize their preferences and settings, and you can include AI and sensors. Okay, so you could optimize the current usage and the setup, right? So the initial brief was to design a bedroom automation system controller that can be retrofitted into a typical middle class bedroom. It needs to be wall mounted and kind of looks similar to a fan regulator. This was the initial brief. So the design process followed, had user research and understanding. That was in week 1. Week 2 followed analysis and narrowing down the focus. And the week 3 was actually doing the design, prototyping, and getting feedback through evaluation. Okay, so these were the 3 broad weeks, how the design process was integrated. Okay, so did primary research through contextual inquiry, interpreting it, mappings of the space, they're called as the work models. Then you narrowed the focus through doing affinities and mapping it. Okay, and you redid the design brief. Initially you started with one. Now after your findings, you kind of redo the design brief. You created typical personas, created a scenario to explain how the system can work or may not work. Okay, set up the interaction design, goals, user flows, how one actually goes about using this application. Okay, and then to design it, you did the information architecture, wireframing, prototyping it. You tested a model with the user. You did the visual identity, redesigned it, and tried it out again. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So contextual inquiries, that's how we started the primary research. This is basically to understand the users. The interviews were conducted with 16 individuals. So it was mainly to understand their daily routines, how did they utilize their spaces in the house, okay, and empathize with their problems, okay, and how can you, make the needs become more effective, okay, and also looked at the demographics of these users. Okay, so the first study was demographics. You can see on the right side the number of floors and how many users stayed in which floor. It was all the way up to the 15th floor. Okay, the first graph shows the gender division. So there were 10 males and 6 females were interviewed. Their age range, they went all the way from 18 years to almost around 50 years of age, okay, both for males and females. Okay, you looked at how many were from urban areas and rural areas. So 6 were from rural and 10 were from urban areas, and whether they worked at home or whether they did it in a hybrid mode or they worked in the office. Okay, so this kind of gives you the profile of the user who stays in this house. Okay, so the initial focus for this contextual inquiry was you needed to gather daily living habits and experiences of the user in their homes, right? So how much use of the bedroom, what are the routines, how do they operate the windows, when do they open and close it, how do they regulate the temperature, okay, and how do they deal with the summer heat and humidity, okay, and are they conscious of their electricity consumption, okay. So this contextual inquiry gave them lots of valuable input. Okay, so it had to do with it. So the key points you can look at it: how much time do you spend in the bedroom? Okay, how long have you been living in this house? Okay, what is your typical routine like? How do you actually operate the window? How do you regulate the temperature? If there are 2 people sharing the bedroom, how do you decide what's the comfortable temperature? How do you manage extreme heat and humidity in summers? Okay, what is the electricity bill like? So these were the kind of questions which were asked, okay, and they were collated in a sheet. Okay, so you can see for each user the answers were summarized, okay, and also categorized into headings. So for example, some had to do with demographics, some had to do with user statements, some were observations, some were insights. Okay, so you could mark these things. Okay, so these were the different kinds of answers that you got from the users. So it was done for all the 16 users and then transferred on to a sheet of small paper, okay, or a sticky note, and this is how it looks for all the 16 users. And then what you did was you did the card sorting. That means the things were similar to each other, you put it into similar groups. Did a subheading and then a bigger heading for that, okay, to summarize what they actually meant and said. Okay, so we'll have a closer look at 1 or 2 of them. Okay, so this is a summation of different things. Okay, important statements are earmarked there. Okay, so it had to do with, when you have automation, it can lead to laziness, okay, or the perception of it. So what did the users say with regard to this? Okay, so that was the answers, then collated, and then this was the summary which was done. Okay, whether they are conscious of cost was the second category. Okay, their statements, okay, and then collating the statements again, okay, and then summarizing it on the top. Okay, so this was actually card sorting. Basically, you looked at cards which are similar in nature, which have similar answers, put them together and summarize that into a statement. Okay, so it becomes a collation of the needs of the users in that sense. Okay, so users' needs versus preferences, that was the topic for this card sorting. Okay, and then if you had people who were sick, who had other needs, okay, how do you take care of that? Okay, so that was another category. Okay, so the card sorting yielded these very nice answers to the typical needs of the users. Okay, and it becomes a very useful information while you're actually conceiving of the solution. Okay, based on this, you can actually summarize all the inferences together. Okay, so just reading them. So cultural and social factors was important. Okay, you need to prioritize things like protection, mobility, accessibility, cleanliness, and rest. You should be able to track some of these. Okay, you need to be able to do the layout and place the elements. Okay, so that you don't have to walk so much to operate something. Okay, so it should be accessible in that sense. Okay, some users are passive, they don't want to take any responsibility, somehow it has to work. Okay, cost consciousness, yes, how do you match it with the usage? Okay, there are safety concerns because so many devices are operating at the same time. Okay, how does laziness play a part in this? Okay, what are their needs and what are their preferences? How do you actually input this kind of data? And how much of things can you control, or how much do you want to control? Okay, so these were the key inferences from the study that we did. Okay, and they also did an interesting mapping of the devices within the spatial configurations. Okay, so the devices are the artifacts, the layout of the bedroom is the space. So you map both together, so you kind of know where the windows are, where the bed is, okay, where the air conditioner is, where the study table is. Okay, and for example, the switch next to the study table, what all does it operate? The switch which is in the dressing room, what does that operate? Okay, so these are important decisions. It actually looks at the whole thing in a whole, and you can visualize all the artifacts within this particular space. Okay, and then you look at it from a slightly different point of view. Okay, so you have the switches. One switch is next to the bed, one is next to the study table. Okay, and they are controlling different things. Okay, so some of the things are actually represented here. So you can see the sun. Sun is important because it brings in both light and temperature, so you need to be able to control the curtains over there. Okay, so that's very important, and you can show the location of other lights, the yellow ones within this place. Places where user spends most of the time is the one in the red color. Okay, so it's a place which is most used by the user. Okay, and the switchboard connections are shown, right? So this is again a very useful information. Okay, this is how the devices finally need to be set up, and the controls, you can locate probably the place for the control, things like that. So decision making based on visualization of the space with respect to the object is a mapping that has been done here. Okay, so let's look at what was initial focus and what it evolved into. Okay, so for example, the questions were: how much time do you spend in your bedroom? How long have you been living in this house? What is your routines? How do you interact with the windows? How do you regulate temperature? What happens when two people share the same room? And how do you choose a temperature? How do you manage the summer heat in Mumbai or the humidity? What is your electricity bills like? We went through this a while back. Now, after looking at the devices, how do you onboard the users onto this new system? Okay, how do you cater to variable demographics? Okay, so that means a child versus sick persons versus an elderly. Yeah, how do I fit into all their needs? Okay, what about user habits? How do I fit it into the user habits, right? And if two people are there, they have probably different habits, and how do I do it? Okay, how time versus automation, right? That's a very important thing. How do I make use of new technologies? How do we provide remote access to users? Okay, and is the system scalable? So these are typical questions that needs to be asked while designing something like a digital device that needs to control all the devices within the bedroom. So after all this, we've come to redefining the brief here. So the redefined brief is how might we design an equitable bedroom automation system that is accessible and affordable for Indian families with upper to lower middle class income levels, which helps them to control appliances and elements in their room easily, reduce effort and save time while prioritizing features such as safety, comfort and trackability. How can we incorporate these into their routines very easily? So this is the revised design brief. So to kind of explain worst case scenario or the problem case scenario, we've taken up a very naughty boy. This is Talvinder. He stays on the second floor in the Shanti Society. He has an alarm, okay, which is very loud, like a machine gun, which kind of wakes him up from sleep in the morning. He goes down, has breakfast, doesn't clean up everything, goes to the school, comes back by about 1 o'clock. He takes the food into his bedroom, has it there and forgets to switch off the AC because he has to go to the tuition then. Okay, comes back, takes a small nap. His friends are calling him to come and play. So he looks out of the window to talk to them, forgets to close the window. When he comes back after the play, when he's having his bath, the place is full of mosquitoes. This is a normal thing. He gets scolding from his parents. Okay, that's become his norm. Okay, and then he goes to his bedroom. He switches off all the lights because he still wants to play and do some gaming. Playing. He goes off to sleep. Next morning again, big alarm, loud alarm, and he wakes up, and the same routine happens again. Okay, so this is kind of a worst case scenario. Okay, you have this boy and he can be naughty and he doesn't take care of things. And would your solution take care of some of these things? That's the bigger question, right? So let's look at the big problems that needs to be solved. Okay, onboarding is important. Okay, you should be able to access these switchboards with a touch, and typically many users don't want to take responsibility. Minimize dust, prioritize things like protection, accessibility, mobility, cleanliness. Okay, how do you deal with things like mosquitoes? How do you balance privacy? How do you deal with emergencies? And minimize interferences and disturbances, and how do you track the energy consumption? Okay, so these are the problems it is to do. So let's look at the conceptual model of the system, the proposed system. So you have the user and the system. The user needs to interact with the system. Okay, he can do it with a switchboard or through a mobile. Mobile gets connected through hotspots or wireless. Okay, and there is a motion sensor which knows when somebody has come into the room. You also need to make use of smart plugs to operate the system, and the system controls things like curtains, windows, fans, lights. Okay, and it's a smart appliance. Can you actually connect it to external appliances also? Okay, so if you look at it, this is the system and the devices and the user and the operating methods that has been defined here. Students also looked at creating personas. Personas are typical people from the user study. You can summarize some characteristics into them. Like for example here Kshitij, okay, he's a data analyst and he's originally from Delhi but he's staying in Bangalore. Okay, and he stays in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor. Okay, has a pet cat. He follows a hybrid model. That means that 3 days offline and 3 days at home. Sundays also sometimes become work days. Okay, he wants to be active. Okay, he does gym. Okay, so these are all the activities. Okay, so this is one of your users. Okay, so for example, he needs convenience and comfort. He wants to be efficient at work. He needs to take care of his pet. Okay, he needs to be healthy. Okay, and he likes natural light. Okay, so that's one of the things. The pain points are that he can be lonely, he forgets things, privacy and security are important to him. Sometimes the mosquitoes come into the house, and there are also unpleasant smells. Okay, so like that you had three more personas. Okay, and then the system was conceived into its components, and you looked at the information architecture. That means that if you have to use the system, what are all the different things the system needs to be connected with that, and what are the steps involved in accessing this different kind of information. So you basically looked at the different kind of devices, each information connected with the device, or each activity connected with the device. How do you operate that activity? How do you trigger that activity? So they made into different groups, almost like branches of a tree. Okay, and they are assigned into different. So this is actually you're doing the details of how your mobile application works, how your touch switchboard works. Okay, so this is the details of it. Okay, so we'll go into after studying that, you made a low fidelity. That means these are figures which indicate there can be controls over there. Okay, so the touch controls, you can see that two lights are there, AC can be operated, fan can be operated. Okay, and you make such that one can actually access this. So the main screens are done. Okay, so you have the nearby devices which shows, the connected devices are shown here, smart plug is shown there. Okay, curtain settings are there, some demographics of the usage is also shown over there. Okay, once you have done this prototype, it's not a working prototype, it's just a simulated prototype. You can actually go to the user, give some tasks and ask him to actually operate this. Okay, so for example, you can give this and say, figure out how to turn on the fan and set it to speed 3. Okay, so he has to go through your information architecture, through these different screens, find out the appropriate buttons to press, and he has to set the fan onto speed 3. Okay, similarly, set up a mood for when you have to work from home. Okay, so you have a setting for moods. The fan should run at the speed of 1, AC should be at 22 degrees, and curtain should be wide open to let the sun and the light inside. Okay, so you actually look how much trouble he takes, whether he is able to do it faster, where does he get stuck. Okay, so the method to do it is called as the think aloud protocol. Basically, you give him the device and ask him to find out this, and ask him to say it loud, whatever he is doing, whether he is getting stuck. Okay, I've got the lights correct. Okay, so basically he says what he is doing. Okay, and you record this conversation, and then you sit afterwards and go through it and say where he has got stuck, where it has been convenient, and this is a case for redesigning the interface again. Okay, so once you got that input, right, see, for example, they got the so there is no save option after creating device settings. This created confusion. These are all the findings. Users did not select all the appliances that were able to be added to routine at once, but they did it one after another. So these are findings. Okay, so once you did that, you also set up the visual identity for the application that you're going to do, the look and feel of it. Okay, and then applied it and made what we call as the high fidelity prototypes. Okay, these are actually how it looks. Okay, so for each one of them, okay, the devices, setting the moods, okay, how do you control the lights, the statistics of the usage, right? So for each of them, there are different screens out there. Okay, you can also make use of micro interaction rules. For example, the law of proximity says that keep similar buttons together. So there's an affinity between them. So grouping similar ones through proximity makes a difference. Okay, so they all belong to similar categories. Okay, Hicks law says that the most important thing should be prominent. Okay, so that makes it easy to find it. Fitts law says that you make sure that one is able to operate it, you give it the enough size. So for example, if it's the thumb operating it, it should fit the size of the thumb. Okay, if it is your forefingers doing it, it can fit the size of the forefinger. So that means you're actually matching it to the human capabilities in that sense. Okay, Murphy's law says that you need some feedback, okay, some assurance that what you've done, actually there is a response from the system. If it keeps quiet, you don't know whether it has done the task or not, right? Okay, confirmation always helps. Okay, so these are simple rules to make your interactions much more nicer. Okay, so you looked at the micro interactions, so you're setting the moods. Okay, these are the devices which are set there. Okay, and you can see the routines along with the modes. Okay, and you can see the usage patterns and the devices it is connected. Okay, so these are different screens from this one. So you can see that this is the final ones, the modes, the routines, the tracking. Okay, and that's how the Denzi final prototype is. Okay, and you can see that that's the bedroom, and you can see the touch device next to the bed. Okay, and the detail of the touch device, you can do different settings with that. Okay, so that is the final solution.